To the families of the victims and all those affected, and we wish all the injured a prompt recovery. The United Nations stands in solidarity with the people and government of Sweden. We hope that those responsible for the attack will be swiftly brought to justice. And in a statement that was issued earlier today on Syria, the Secretary General said he continues to follow the situation in Syria closely and with grave concern. He said he was abhorred by the chemical weapons attack in Khan Shaykhun in Syria and the death and injury of many innocent civilians. He stressed that he had long stated that there needs to be accountability for such crimes in line with existing international norms and Security Council resolutions. He says he's been following reports of the airstrikes against the Shayrat air base in Syria conducted by the United States. Mindful of the risk of escalation, the Secretary General appealed for restraint to avoid any facts that could deepen the suffering of the Syrian people. These events underscore his belief that there is no other way to solve the conflict than through a political solution. The Secretary General calls on the parties to urgently renew their commitment to making progress in the Geneva talks. A political solution also remains essential for progress for fighting against terrorism. The Security Council has the primary responsibility for international peace and security, and the Secretary General called on the Council to unite and exercise that responsibility. For too long, international law has been ignored in the Syrian conflict, and it is our shared duty to uphold international standards of humanity, the Secretary General said. This is a prerequisite for ending the unrelenting suffering of the people of Syria. That statement is online. As you know, the Security Council is currently holding an open meeting on Syria, and Jeff Feltman, the Undersecretary General for Political Affairs, briefed Council members. And today, as you know, is the commemoration of the International Day of the Reflection on the Genocide in Rwanda. The Secretary General will speak at the commemoration taking place in the Trusteeship Council at 4 p.m. He's expected to stress that the best way to honor the memory of those who were murdered is to ensure that such events never occur again, which is why the world must be ever alert to the warning signs of genocide and act quickly and early to avert it. The Secretary General will reiterate that the UN is working hard to strengthen its capacities for preventing diplomacy, including through mediation and the peaceful settlements of disputes. And on South Sudan, you will have seen yesterday we appointed Lieutenant General Frank Kamanzi of Rwanda as the new force commander for the UN peacekeeping mission in South Sudan. And on the ground, the mission reports that its patrol has not yet been able to reach Pajok in eastern Equatorial Province to assess reports of fighting between the SPLA troops and the opposition. UNMISS reiterates its call on the government to allow access to Pajok as obligated under the existing Status of Forces Agreement so it can fully implement its mandate. As a consequence of the violence in the area, the UN Refugee Agency says more refugees are fleeing for safety who report witnessing their loved ones shot dead at close range, with many arrested or slaughtered, including children. Many people are still hiding in the bush trying to find their way through Uganda, though Uganda's approach in dealing with refugees is among the most progressive. Chronic underfunding continues to affect the UNHCR and Uganda's activities. The current appeal for $781 million is currently only 11% funded. And speaking of funding, our colleagues at the World Food Programme inform us that thanks to new donor contributions, they've been able to resume providing full food rations in Kenya's Dadaab and Kakuma refugee camps starting in April 1st. This comes after more than a year of ration cuts. However, WFP stresses that the funding currently available for cash transfers, which make up 30% of the refugees' food assistance, will last only until May, that is next month. More details online. I also wanted to flag that this morning the Secretary General met with David Beasley, the new Executive Director for WFP, who is, I think, heading to WFP headquarters this evening. And speaking of traveling, the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, departed New York for Marrakesh to participate in the 2017 Governance Weekend of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, which she's delivering a keynote address. And while in Morocco, she will also engage with representatives of the UN system. And she'll be back in New York on Sunday. And the UN Human Rights Office today strongly condemned the execution of 3 men in Gaza that took place yesterday, despite appeals by the office and other international and Palestinian organizations for the sentences not to go ahead. The Human Rights Office says these executions were carried out in a breach of Palestine's obligations under international law, including stringent conditions on the use of the death penalty. And an update from the Ukraine. In the 2 regions most affected by the conflict in the eastern part of the country, more than 200,000 children, that's about 1 in 4, require urgent psychosocial support to overcome the trauma of living through more than 3 years of violence, according to a new report by UNICEF. UNICEF's new statement, rather, issued by UNICEF. UNICEF's representative in the Ukraine, Giovanna Barberis, said the world has forgotten about this invisible crisis in eastern Ukraine, but hundreds of thousands of children are paying a heavy price, one that could last a lifetime without adequate support. And she appealed for urgent funds. And our colleagues in the humanitarian office say that displacement from West Mosul in Iraq continues, with more than 9,000 people recorded as displaced from West Mosul yesterday. This brings the total number of people displaced from West Mosul to over 264,000 since the start of the operations in that particular area on the 19th of February. An estimated 334,000 people are currently displaced in total as a result of the fighting in both East and West Mosul. And also from our humanitarian colleagues, they're launching today in Lima a flash appeal to request just under $40 million to assist 400,000 people impacted by recent flooding in Peru. More details from OCHA. And UNDP launched yesterday a report that says the social and economic cost of recent spread of the Zika virus in Latin America and the Caribbean will total up to $18 billion between 2015 and 2017. More information on UNDP's website. And today is, does anybody know what today is? It's many things. It's World Health Day. And World Health Organization is leading a 1-year campaign on depression and the leading cause of ill health and disability worldwide. According to latest estimates, 300 million people are now living with depressions. The overall goal of the campaign is that more people with depression everywhere around the world both seek and get help. More information on WHO's website. We're almost done here. In response to questions we received offline regarding the situation in the Maldives, what we can say is that we're closely monitoring the situation in that country and urge national authorities to uphold the necessary conditions for democracy, the rule of law, and human rights in line with the country's constitution. We reiterate our call for all political stakeholders to find common solution through inclusive dialogue. And I wanted to flag an event that will take place on Monday at 3:15 in the Trusteeship Council. The Secretary General will, on that time, designate his first messenger of peace, which will be Malala Yousafzai. She, as you know, a global advocate for girls' education and youngest ever Nobel Prize winner. She and the Secretary General will have a public conversation in the Trusteeship Council on girls' empowerment and girls' education. And she will be at that time officially designated as a messenger of peace with a special focus on girls' education. And that event will be open to you and will be webcast and Facebooked and everything else. And today we say thank you to our friends in Trinidad and Tobago who have paid their budget dues in full, which brings us up to 70-something. I should know before I check. 77. All right, Linda, go ahead.
I just have a quick question about the SG's statement.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I missed it, but did he either express support for the strike or any opposition to it? I mean, I heard him. I saw that he expressed concern about a fear of escalation.
I think the focus of the Secretary General's statement is one reminding the parties on the need for a political solution. The recalling the appalling nature of what we saw in terms of the chemical, what looks like chemical weapons attacks, and expressing, I think, his fear of escalation of escalation of violence, and I think a clear appeal to the Security Council to exercise its responsibility and to unite in search for peace and security. Masuji.
Thank you, sir. Stefan, talking about the Secretary General's follow-up on the question. I mean, when the United States attacked Iraq in 2003, the Secretary General at that time said, without the authorization of the Security Council, it was illegal. So does the Secretary General think that this attack that the United States, did on Syria, killing about 7 people, I guess, so far, is it legal or illegal?
I think while looking back at historical references is always interesting, I think everything we do need to look at the events themselves. We're not going to get into the debate on international law at this point in this room.
But without the authorization of the Security Council, I mean, given the fact that it was a horrible crime that Syria committed, or the voter, that without the authorization of Security Council, is that legal or illegal?
I think I've just answered the question. We're not going to get into the debate of legal or illegality in international law at this point in this room. Yeah. And then Luke.
On the same topic, does he see it in violation of any Security Council resolutions that we're taking on Syria or UN General Assembly resolutions? And was he did he know about the attack before it happened,
No,
or how he know?
The Secretary General is not informed. I think, like many of us, he learned on it by getting an alert on his phone, most likely, or an email from his spokesman, even. I think, taken as a whole, in terms of the last 6 years of the Syrian conflict, it's clear that for too long international law has been ignored. The Secretary General again appeals to the Security Council to unite and fulfill the responsibility that is assigned to it. Luke.
Can I continue on the same vein, but from a different
angle?
Try. There's an argument we're hearing a lot in the international law world. It seems to be building through the years that perhaps the Charter shouldn't be read so literally, that in light of all these procedural hurdles that are preventing collective action on the Security Council, that maybe something can be technically illegal, but in practice legitimate in a way. Is that an argument that the SG understands, do you think?
It's, I don't know if we're going to have the same debate about the UN Charter as some people have about the Constitution of the host country. It's a fascinating panel discussion for which we need to get a lot of lawyers. The Secretary General, I think, is well acquainted with the charters and the responsibilities that it assigns to various parts of this organization. Mr. Lee.
Sure. Something on that topic, and then I have some other questions. But Stefan de Mistura has this quote where he says he's fully and operationally focused on the situation. Can you unpack that a little bit? Like, was he informed of this? Has he had a dialogue with either the United States or anyone else?
What
does it mean to be operationally focused?
I'm not aware. I'm not aware that he was informed. I don't believe anybody in the UN was informed. But as I said, I'm just not aware that he was informed. Obviously, I think the events of the last few days are likely to have an impact on his efforts. And so I think, like all of us, with the Secretary General, his envoy, we are focused and refocused on trying to get make sure the political process and the Geneva talks stay on track. And the Secretary General's belief that there is no other option but a political option remains, and he's asking everybody to recommit to the Geneva talks.
I have some other. I don't want to. If anyone else wants to go on this
No,
topic.
go ahead. Go. Ask your other question.
Okay.
Ask your other question.
All right. I want to. It's actually something that I'd asked in your absence. I'd asked about this widely seen video from Burundi in which the militia of the ruling party says that they're going to impregnate the women of their opposition. So many people see this as actually kind of an echo of what happened in Rwanda in 1994. And since it's that day, I'm sort of wondering what is the UN's response to this very troubling video of a militia marching and talking about impregnating
I think
opposition women.
this kind of that kind of rhetoric, those kinds of messages are deeply disturbing to anyone. And we would hope that the government takes the necessary measures to ensure that we don't hear this kind of rhetoric. Yep.
Jonathan Sanders from ICAST News. In reflecting on what you said, that the SG voiced that for too long the norms of international law have been ignored in Syria, which sounds very much like what Mr. Putin said on the Meade site. He said the below of the United States is a narushение, is a violation of the norms of international law. Is there, in the SG's opinion, any Security Council authorization that makes this not a violation, or is this in the spirit of what the Council says?
This is what the Secretary General says, is if you look back over the last years of the Syria conflict, whether it's the forced movement of people, the besieging of communities, what we've always seen, starvation, whether it's medical supplies being taken out of aid convoys, whether it's the use of barrel bombs, whether it's the use of chemical weapons, whether it's the use of civilians basically as human shields, that's an affront to humanity. That's an affront to international law and humanitarian law. As I said to the earlier questions from your colleagues, we're not going to get into a debate here on the legality or not legality of the airstrikes. That's just not a debate we're going to get into today. Luke and then Masoud.
Just quickly, I'm curious why Mr. Feldman and not the SG was at the meeting. Was that a request by the U.S. or was that just?
No, I mean they asked for a briefer. I think Mr. Feldman is the designated official to brief on, or was it basically an update of what we knew on Syria. Mr. de Mistura will brief next week. The Secretary General himself had made his position known before the start of the meeting through his statement, so I wouldn't read anything into that. Masuji.
Yeah. One is the United Nations or OPCW investigating the attack earlier, and will it come out with any findings?
The OPCW fact-finding mission is currently working on trying to gather facts and analyzing information they can get from the Han Sheikhoum. As you know, there are two relevant Security Council resolutions, I think 2235 and 2319, which have to deal with the joint investigative mechanism where the OPCW fact-finding mission which kicks in once the OPCW determines or have determined that toxic chemicals have been used in Syria. So it's a multi-step process. But right now the OPCW is very much seized on the matter, and their fact-finding mission is at work.
Also, about this thing that you announced earlier, Malala Yousafzai, is it on Monday?
From what I heard myself say, it is on Monday at 3:15 in the Trusteeship
And
Council.
this conversation between...
It's also
the
on
Secretary
Monday.
General?
Same place, same time.
I see.
Yep. Go ahead in the back.
Yes, Dov Levy from the Jewish Press. We've seen for many years the condemnation on Israel in terms of human rights from the United Nations Human Rights Council. Does the Secretary General foresee any kind of condemnation from the same council due to what happened in Gaza with the execution of those three individuals? And it was stated that they were collaborators with Israel, and so they were executed merely for that. Does the Secretary General see any kind of...
I would refer you to what the High Commissioner for Human Rights said, which was a clear condemnation of the execution of these three Palestinians, which violates international law. Whether or not the Human Rights Council will take up the issue, that's obviously a question for them to decide. Mr. Lee.
Sure. I wanted to ask you, I guess, about the UN system and freedom of the press. The FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, is pursuing a criminal case against a publication called Italian Insider in Rome for essentially, the publication says, for just covering them in corruption within FAO. And I wanted to know, is there any UN policy? Obviously, they're free to write a letter to the editor or whatever else, but they're affirmatively actually trying to shut the publication down. Is that consistent with the free press principles that the UN system says it espouses?
UN is here to defend the free press as we do here. I'm not aware of the FAO case. I would encourage you to reach out to what is a specialized agency.
I guess, but yeah, the head of it is obviously very comfortable with what he's doing. I'm asking you, I guess, as the spokesman for the
I
Secretary General.
I don't know enough about the case.
Okay, maybe. All right. And I also wanted to ask you, in the what's now called the Eng Lap Seng case and used to be the John Ash case, there's been a request for an extension. The reason I'm asking you about it is that the letter from the lawyers for Eng Lap Seng cite a new trove of information that's been given to them, partially, and part of this involves documents of South-South News and also John Ash emails. And since both of these may concern the very topics that the UN conducted its audit into, I wanted to know, I hear this line generally, you're going to wait to the end of the case or you're going to monitor the case, but is the UN system, whether OLA or ever going to take a look at these documents to see what, as it reflects to the need for UN reform or who did what here?
I think obviously we'll see what happens at the end, and if we need to take if it needs to impact the investigations I've already done, we'll take a look at it, and we are as a duty cooperating with the relevant judicial authorities.
And did you? I'm sorry to follow up on this, but yesterday I'd asked you about the financial disclosure things, and you'd say I wasn't clear from what you said. Like I'd ask you about
I'll
a
check.
discrepancy.
I don't know if the rules have.
I just
changed.
like a
We can
response.
check.
It's like maybe
we'll
you
check.
forgot to put
Okay,
it,
I'll
or
check.
maybe.
Okay, I'll check. Thank you.